6 police cruisers tearing up my dirt road at 6 a.m. should have been the end of everything. Instead, I smiled, hit start on my phone timer, and leaned against the same porch post my great-grandfather built in 1924. Vivian Blackthorne struts out in a pressed white suit that costs more than my truck, waving a court order for $2 million worth of land her HOA claims is theirs. 6 deputies spread across my fields like they already own them, boots crushing the same soil we've worked since before her neighborhood was a swamp. She's screaming about trespassing and seizure. My roosters are screaming back. The diesel fumes mix with morning dew on my tomatoes, and I can almost taste the revenge I've waited 847 days to serve. That manila envelope in my back pocket, the one her lawyers swore didn't exist, in exactly the amount of time showing on my screen right now, Vivian's going to learn what happens when you try to steal a century from the wrong family. Keep watching. Drop your city below if you've ever dreamed of watching a HOA Karen's world collapse in real time. I'm reading every single one. My name's Jake Thornfield, and this story starts 3 years ago when my father died clutching my hand in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams, making me promise something that nearly destroyed me. Don't let the vultures take what we built, son. He was talking about 340 acres of Missouri farmland that's been in our family since my great-grandfather Ezekiel scraped together enough Depression-era dollars to buy it in 1924. 4 generations of Thornfields have worked this soil, the same black earth that still gets under my fingernails every morning, the kind of dirt that stains your boots and your soul. When Dad passed in 2019, I inherited everything. The legacy, the debt, and a property tax bill that makes grown men weep. See, the county assessor doesn't give a damn that we're a working farm. They see 340 acres valued at $2 acres, $1 million for development potential, not the $340,000 it's worth when you're actually growing food. The math is brutal. $47,000 a year in taxes on a farm that nets maybe $60,000 in a good year. Quick financial reality check. Always research your property's agricultural versus development assessment. The difference can bankrupt a family farm overnight. The vultures started circling in 2018 when Caldwell Enterprises broke ground on Willowbrook Estates right against our fence line. The sound of nail guns at dawn replaced birdsong, and the smell of fresh concrete mixed with morning coffee became my new reality. Within 2 years, 127 homes averaging $800,000 each sprouted like expensive mushrooms where cattle used to graze. The culture clash hit like a freight train. New residents complained about my 5 a.m. milking schedule, the organic perfume of manure after fertilizing, and the earth-shaking symphony of my combine harvester during corn season. I get it. Nobody drops $750,000 expecting to wake up to roosters. But here's the thing. We were here first. 75 years first. Enter Vivian Blackthorne, stage left, wearing attitude like armor. Picture this. 52 years old, real estate attorney from Chicago, drives a white Tesla Model S that gleams like fresh snow even after driving dirt roads. I've never seen her without a designer blazer and manicured nails sharp enough to perform surgery. She speaks in clipped legal jargon like she's billing $400 an hour for every conversation, and her perfume could choke a horse at 50 yards. Vivian moved to Willowbrook for one reason: the million-dollar view of rolling farmland from her master bedroom window. Problem was that scenic farmland came with an actual farmer who had the audacity to farm it. She got herself elected HOA president faster than you can say property values. Her campaign promise? Optimize our community's aesthetic. Translation: eliminate the inconvenient agricultural reality ruining her Instagram-worthy sunrise photos. The harassment campaign started like Chinese water torture. Slow, steady, designed to drive you insane. Noise complaints every time I cranked a tractor before 8 a.m. Unsanitary condition reports when I spread perfectly legal manure. Certified letters demanding I attend HOA meetings to discuss my operations, despite my farm predating their precious HOA by 3/4 of a century. But Vivian's nothing if not patient and methodical. She knows exactly how to weaponize bureaucracy. The real war began 8 months ago when she filed a groundwater contamination complaint with zero evidence, just her legal credentials and Concerned Citizen Act. Suddenly, I'm drowning in county health inspectors, environmental audits, and zoning appeals that cost more than my combine payments. The local news ate it up. Suburban families versus industrial farming. Made me sound like I was running some toxic waste facility instead of milking 30 gentle Holsteins twice daily. My lawyer, Glenn Morrison, been handling family legal stuff since Dirt was young, kept telling me to fight defensively, play by their rules, stay nice. That strategy burned through $23,000 in 4 months and got me absolutely nowhere except deeper in debt. I was bleeding money, fighting battles I never chose, while Vivian just kept filing more complaints like she was getting paid by the grievance. The breaking point came when she convinced the county to file an emergency injunction claiming my century-old farm posed an immediate public health hazard. That's when I stopped playing defense and started learning the rules of their game. 3 weeks after that bogus health complaint, Vivian made her first real power play, and I walked straight into her trap like a lamb to slaughter. She'd packed the county commissioners' meeting with every Willowbrook resident she could drag out on a Tuesday night. The conference room reeked of expensive perfume and entitlement, 30 people in business casual clutching printed talking points like prayer books. I showed up smelling like diesel and cow barn, wearing my cleanest flannel that still bore witness to morning coffee and honest work. The agenda item looked innocent. Agricultural Operations Proximity Ordinance. Boring enough that only 3 people would oppose it. Me, Glenn Morrison, and maybe old Henderson if his arthritis wasn't acting up. Vivian strode to the podium in a navy blazer worth more than my monthly feed bill, laser pointer glinting like a weapon. Her presentation was corporate smooth. Declining property values, health concerns, children's safety. Stock photos of massive industrial farms that looked nothing like my 30-head dairy operation. We're simply asking for common sense protections, she announced, clicking to a slide showing a proposed 500-foot buffer between livestock and homes. Hardly unreasonable for modern community standards, 500 feet. The magic number that would kill my operation since my barn sits 200 feet from the property line. She knew it, I knew it. And from the satisfied smirks around the room, everyone else knew it too. But while Vivian was busy playing suburban general, I'd been doing something she never expected from a simple farmer. Homework. 3 weekends in the county archives had taught me something my father always said. When lawyers start throwing around words like ordinance and compliance, that's when you dig deeper into what the law actually says. Those dusty files and microfilm reels had become my best friends, and buried in 1924 property records, I'd found something beautiful. I stood up slow, carrying a cardboard box that looked older than some of the commissioners. The room went quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and Vivian's barely contained irritation at being interrupted. "Ma'am, before you vote on this," I said, setting the box down with the kind of reverence you reserve for family Bibles, "you might want to see what my great-grandfather negotiated when he bought this land." The original deed spread across that podium like a roadmap to victory. Property boundaries, water rights, and, the crown jewel, specific right-to-farm protections that my great-grandfather Ezekiel had insisted on after watching other farmers get squeezed out by expanding towns. "This operation has run continuously since 1924, I continued, watching Vivian's confident expression crack like old paint. Missouri agricultural shield laws protect any farm predating residential development by more than 10 years. What you're proposing? Legally unenforceable on my property." Commissioner Bradley leaned forward, studying the documents. "These authenticated, son?" "State Agricultural Extension confirmed everything yesterday." I handed him the official letter, still warm from yesterday's visit to the county seat. "Turns out when you've been farming since Calvin Coolidge was president, you get certain protections." That's when the real discovery hit me, something I'd noticed while researching those deed protections but hadn't fully grasped until this moment. Those 1924 water rights didn't stop at my property line. They extended under every house in Willowbrook Estates. My family controlled the aquifer feeding their private wells. I kept that revelation to myself. "Some cards you save for later hands." Vivian tried to recover, her voice climbing an octave. "Commissioners, surely 19th century paperwork can't override modern safety standards." "Ma'am," I interrupted. "My farms operated safely for nearly a century. We've never had a health violation, environmental issue, or safety complaint until your neighborhood decided our legal agricultural practices were inconvenient for your view." The silence stretched like taffy. You could hear papers shuffling, chairs creaking, and somewhere in the distance, the rumble of a freight train that had been crossing these fields since before Willowbrook was even a developer's dream. Commissioner Bradley cleared his throat. I motioned to table pending legal review. 3 votes yes, 2 no. Vivian gathered her materials with the precise movements of someone barely controlling her rage. Her heels clicked across marble like machine gun fire, but just before she reached the door, she turned back with a smile that would have made a rattlesnake nervous. "This isn't over, Mr. Thornfield." "No, ma'am," I replied, tipping my John Deere cap. "I don't expect it is." But what she didn't know was that I'd already moved beyond defense. While she was planning her next attack, I was discovering just how deep those 1924 water rights really went. And if Vivian wanted to play hardball with a fourth-generation farmer, she was about to learn that some games have rules she'd never even heard of. Vivian's next move came 2 weeks later, and it was pure suburban warfare disguised as maternal concern. She'd figured out that nothing gets politicians moving faster than the phrase, "think of the children," so she weaponized motherhood itself. The first warning came from Martha Henderson calling at dawn, voice tight with worry. "Jake, you need to see what's plastered all over the neighborhood Facebook page." I pulled up Willowbrook Estates community on my phone while sipping coffee that tasted like defeat. Vivian had launched Mothers for Safe Streets, professional graphics showing my tractor in a near miss with a school bus, complete with crying child emojis. The post had 47 angry face reactions and counting. "Agricultural vehicles create dangerous conditions during school hours," the caption screamed. She'd scheduled an emergency county meeting demanding restrictions on farm equipment using residential access roads between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m., basically the only hours I could work. But the real kick in the teeth came Tuesday when my insurance agent called with news that made my coffee turn to acid in my stomach. "Jake, counties requiring all commercial agricultural operations to carry $2 million in liability instead of your current $1 million, Bill Kowalski said, his voice carrying that Undertaker's tone. "Insurance guy's perfect when they're about to bury you financially." "Commercial? Bill, I milk 30 cows, not 1,000. "I know, buddy. But they're calling any operation selling products commercially as high risk due to increased residential proximity. Your quote came back at 47 grand annually." The phone nearly slipped from my suddenly sweaty palm. 47,000, 3 times my current premium, due in 30 days, or kiss my permits goodbye. Vivian had found the perfect financial noose. But here's where my father's voice echoed from memory, something he'd told me during his own battles with city bureaucrats. "Son, when they try to squeeze you with their rules, remember, farmers been dealing with this crap since before these people were born. There's always another door, you just gotta know where to look." That afternoon, I called Martha Kelligan at the State Farmers Cooperative, my fingers crossed so tight they cramped. The smell of fresh-cut hay drifted through my kitchen window while she explained something beautiful. Missouri agricultural exemptions meant family farms under 500 acres with heritage status qualified for state-sponsored group coverage, and Mr. Thornfield, your premium would run about $12,000 annually with better protection than most private policies, she said, her voice like an angel announcing salvation. Heritage status. That phrase kept popping up like a golden thread weaving through every solution. While filling out applications, I stumbled down a research rabbit hole that would have made old Ezekiel proud. The state maintains something called agricultural heritage properties, working farms with 50-plus years of continuous operation. But here's the part that made my pulse quicken. Properties meeting federal criteria could apply for National Register inclusion. And federal historic status. That's kryptonite to local zoning ordinances. I'd found my nuclear option. Friday's county meeting was pure suburban theater. Vivian had recruited 6 mothers carrying poster boards with photos of children at bus stops, red arrows pointing to danger zones where my equipment supposedly lurked like mechanical predators. The conference room smelled like expensive hand lotion and righteous indignation. "Commissioners," Vivian began, her voice dripping with manufactured maternal anguish, "we're not anti-agriculture. We're simply requesting reasonable safety measures during school hours when our precious children are most vulnerable." Reasonable. I'd learned to despise that word like poison ivy. When my turn came, I approached the podium carrying documentation thick enough to choke a horse. The commissioners looked intrigued. Vivian looked like she smelled something rotten. "Before we talk about danger," I said, spreading out insurance certificates, safety training completions, and federal historic designation paperwork, "let's talk about facts." I explained my new state-sponsored coverage that exceeded their inflated requirements, showed agricultural safety certifications I'd earned the previous week, then dropped the hammer. I've also applied for National Register of Historic Places designation. Federal historic status would protect this operation under the National Historic Preservation Act, superseding local traffic restrictions. The silence was delicious. You could hear Vivian's manicured fingernails drumming against her leather portfolio like impatient rain. But then I played the card that really twisted the knife. I should mention, USDA studies show children living near working farms have 40% lower rates of asthma and allergies. The hygiene hypothesis suggests rural exposure actually strengthens immune systems. Your kids might be healthier because of my farm. Commissioner Bradley studied my documents while Vivian's soccer mom army exchanged confused glances. Science wasn't supposed to betray them. Vivian shot up like a jack-in-the-box, pointing an accusatory finger that could have cut glass. Commissioners, we cannot allow 19th century loopholes to endanger 21st century families. Ma'am, Bradley replied with barely concealed amusement. Seems Mr. Thornfield's following proper legal channels. Motion to defer pending federal review. Another victory, but watching Vivian gather her materials, I caught something dangerous in her eyes. She was learning too, adapting like a virus. The real war was just beginning. 2 weeks after my federal historic designation bombshell, Vivian decided to drop the nuclear option on my head. I should have known something big was coming when black SUVs with tinted windows started cruising my property line like sharks circling wounded prey. Not the amateur surveillance from her HOA rent-a-cops. This was corporate-grade intimidation, the kind that costs serious money and sends a very specific message. The call came Thursday morning while I was elbow-deep in a busted irrigation line, my hands caked with mud and my patience running thinner than skim milk. Glenn Morrison's voice carried the weight of a man who'd just watched someone kick a puppy. Jake, they're going nuclear, eminent domain. I nearly dropped my wrench into the muck. You're kidding. Emergency city council session Monday night. Vivian's convinced them your property is critically needed for a regional stormwater management facility. They've got engineering reports thicker than a phone book and the kind of environmental studies that could choke a bureaucrat. Eminent domain. The government's legal right to steal your property for the greater good and pay you whatever scraps they think you deserve. It's every landowner's nightmare, especially when the people deciding what's good for the public have private bank accounts getting fatter from your misery. The engineering study read like science fiction. Caldwell Enterprises had commissioned a masterpiece of bureaucratic horseshit, claiming my 340 acres were the optimal and only viable location for managing runoff from future development phases. Never mind that my land sits on the highest ground in 3 counties and hasn't seen standing water since Noah built his ark. But the real gut punch was the appraisal. City assessor valued my life's work at $890,000, less than the agricultural assessment, completely ignoring development potential, water rights, or the fact that similar properties sold for triple that amount. I had 30 days to bend over and take it, or face condemnation proceedings that would drag on for years while lawyers got rich off my misery. Here's what Vivian didn't know. While she was busy playing municipal puppet master, I'd been digging into legal archives like a man possessed, fueled by black coffee and generational fury. That 1924 deed kept revealing gifts from my brilliant great-grandfather. Buried in the fine print was something called a perpetual agricultural covenant. Ezekiel had insisted the land remain agricultural in perpetuity to protect the original seller's adjacent property. The covenant was ironclad, recorded before the city existed, and it made development legally impossible. But the real nuclear bomb was those water rights. My family didn't just own wells, we controlled exclusive extraction rights to the primary aquifer feeding every overpriced house in Willowbrook. They needed our water to keep their million-dollar lawns green and their infinity pools filled. If Vivian wanted to play hardball, I had a Louisville Slugger made of legal dynamite. The weekend before Monday's council meeting, my security cameras captured something beautiful. 3 weeks of documented trespassing by environmental contractors hired by Caldwell Enterprises. Nighttime soil sampling, unauthorized testing equipment, professional environmental surveys, all conducted without permission on private property. I let them keep coming like moths to a flame. Every violation documented, every trespass recorded, every illegal sample cataloged. Sometimes the best strategy is giving your enemies enough rope to hang themselves, then selling tickets to the execution. Monday's emergency session packed the council chambers tighter than sardines in a can. The air reeked of nervous sweat, expensive cologne, and the kind of desperation that comes from watching your get-rich-quick scheme circle the drain. Vivian had marshaled her forces, environmental consultants, engineering experts, and a Greek chorus of concerned citizens waving color-printed propaganda about flood prevention. The presentation was Broadway quality, dramatic slides showing apocalyptic flooding scenarios, cost-benefit analyses that would make an accountant weep, and expert testimony delivered with the gravity of a cancer diagnosis. Professional, polished, and built on a foundation of lies thicker than a campaign promise. When they finished their dog and pony show, I walked to the podium carrying a single manila envelope that felt heavier than a coffin. The room went silent except for fluorescent lights humming overhead and someone's nervous stomach gurgling in the back row. "Before you vote to steal property that's fed this community for 99 years, I said, opening the envelope with the deliberate care of a bomb disposal expert, you might want to explain why your environmental consultants have been trespassing on my land for 3 weeks. I spread out photographs showing unauthorized testing equipment, security camera footage with clear timestamps, and documentation of every illegal soil sample. Vivian's face went whiter than fresh paint. Furthermore, I continued, pulling out the 1924 covenant like a royal flush in a high-stakes poker game, this property cannot legally be developed for anything except agriculture. The covenant predates your city by 30 years and supersedes eminent domain authority under federal agricultural protection laws. Councilmember Davidson studied the documents with the expression of a man watching his political career flash before his eyes. Mr. Thornfield, are you saying we lack legal standing? I'm saying anyone who votes to condemn this property is violating federal law and personally liable for civil rights violations. But hey, that's just my opinion. Ask your lawyers what they think about federal agricultural crime investigations. The motion died 5-0. Vivian stormed out like a tornado in heels, but I caught something dangerous in her eyes as she passed, pure desperation mixed with rage. That's when really dangerous people do really stupid things. Sunday afternoon, 3 days after watching Vivian's eminent domain scheme explode in her face, I was sitting in the basement of the State Historical Society like some kind of legal archaeology nerd, digging through boxes that smelled like dust, old dreams, and bureaucratic amnesia. I'd come hunting for more ammunition to strengthen my federal historic designation, but what I found made my previous victories look like shooting bottle rockets at a battleship. The manila folder was wedged behind a filing cabinet like someone had tried to bury it forever. Agricultural Heritage Trust, 1924, scrawled in faded ink that made my pulse quicken before I even opened it. The first page hit me like lightning. A letter in my great-grandfather's careful penmanship, dated March 15, 1923, addressed to the Missouri State Agricultural Commissioner, "Sir, I am prepared to donate development rights to the state of Missouri in perpetuity in exchange for permanent agricultural tax exemption and protection from future municipal interference." My coffee went cold as I read the response letter, stamped with an official state seal that looked older than God. "Mr. Thornfield, your proposal is accepted. Property designated as Agricultural Heritage Trust, No. 007, administered by the State Agricultural Department. Trust status supersedes all local ordinances and provides protection under federal agricultural conservation laws." I had to read it 3 times before my brain processed what I'd stumbled onto. This wasn't just some deed restriction or grandfather clause. This was a legal fortress built by a man who'd seen the future coming and decided to armor plate his legacy against it. An agricultural heritage trust meant my property existed in a protected bubble that city councils couldn't pop, developers couldn't penetrate, and power-drunk HOA presidents couldn't even fog up with their breath. The state of Missouri was legally obligated to protect my farm like it was a national monument. But the part that made my hands shake wasn't the legal protection. It was the emergency fund. $127,000 sitting untouched in a state agricultural account since 1924, earning interest and growing like a patient dragon waiting to be awakened. With trembling fingers, I dialed the number listed for the State Agricultural Department, expecting voicemail hell or bureaucratic purgatory. Instead, I got Caroline Merritt, Agricultural Trust Administrator, who answered like she'd been waiting 99 years for this exact phone call. "Mr. Thornfield," she said, her voice carrying the excitement of someone who'd finally found the missing crown jewel. We've been maintaining trust number 007 since your great-grandfather established it. We just needed a family member to activate enforcement provisions. What does that mean in English? It means every complaint filed against your property, every ordinance passed targeting your operation, every legal action taken since 1924, all completely invalid. The city, county, HOA, none of them have jurisdiction over trust property. They've been fighting a war against state sovereignty. The implications crashed over me like a tsunami of pure justice. Every sleepless night, every legal fee, every moment Vivian had made me feel like David facing Goliath, all based on authority that existed only in her delusional imagination. She'd been playing chess while I'd just discovered we were actually playing poker, and I'd been holding a royal flush the entire time without knowing it. Monday night's emergency council session was perfectly timed, with media attention focused on the eminent domain controversy. Revealing the trust status would deliver maximum humiliation with maximum witnesses. Not just victory, complete annihilation of everything she'd built her harassment campaign on. I spent the rest of Sunday preparing documentation, coordinating with Caroline Merritt, and practicing the presentation that would end this war forever. The trust wasn't just protection, it was legal immunity, backed by state enforcement power and federal conservation laws. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something dangerous. The cold confidence of someone about to watch their enemy's world collapse in real time. Vivian wanted to play hardball with a century-old farm family. She was about to learn that some games end with complete destruction. Monday morning, I transformed my father's old study into a command center that would have made Napoleon jealous. Maps covered every inch of wall space, legal documents carpeted the oak desk like snow, and the air hummed with the electric smell of fresh coffee, printer ink, and impending revenge. Caroline Merritt's voice crackled through the phone with barely contained excitement as we coordinated what she called the most satisfying trust enforcement action in state history. "Mr. Thornfield, I'm driving down personally to watch this unfold," she said, her tone suggesting she wouldn't miss this show for all the soybeans in Missouri. When local governments overstep their authority this spectacularly, we don't just enforce. We make examples that echo for decades. Examples that echo. I could practically taste the sweet satisfaction already. My next call went to the Constitutional Law Foundation that had been tracking my case like legal vultures circling fresh roadkill. Turns out, agricultural property rights violations involving century-old heritage trusts were the kind of cases that made constitutional lawyers wake up in cold sweats of pure excitement. "Jake," attorney Rebecca Walsh practically purred through the receiver, "if this trust documentation checks out and our preliminary review says it's bulletproof, you're holding legal dynamite. Mind if we bring some journalist friends to document the explosion?" Journalist friends covering a legal explosion? Christmas morning couldn't feel this good. The research phase had been like drinking from a fire hose of beautiful, beautiful knowledge. Agricultural heritage trusts were rarer than honest politicians. Only 7 existed statewide, making each one a legal unicorn protected by state sovereignty and federal conservation laws. Any municipality stupid enough to challenge trust authority would face intervention from agencies with budgets bigger than small countries. But the financial revelation was what really made my farmer's heart sing like a well-tuned John Deere. That emergency defense fund hadn't been sitting idle for 99 years. Compound interest had transformed great-grandfather Ezekiel's modest contribution into nearly $400,000 of pure legal ammunition, earmarked specifically for destroying exactly the kind of suburban harassment campaign Vivian had orchestrated. Tuesday brought my secret weapon, Martha Henderson's coffee shop conspiracy. Turns out, longtime residents had been documenting Vivian's corruption with the methodical precision of farmers tracking weather patterns. "Honey," Martha said, spreading photographs across my kitchen table like a poker player revealing a royal flush. "We've got documentation of every shady deal, every closed-door meeting, every time that woman's husband plays footsie with developers at the country club. Got enough evidence here to bury half the city council." The documentation was comprehensive enough to make a federal prosecutor weep with joy. Financial relationships between HOA board members and Caldwell Enterprises. City council members receiving consulting fees that looked suspiciously like bribes. Richmond Blackthorn's option contracts on adjacent properties, all contingent on my farm being rezoned for development. Wednesday delivered reinforcements I hadn't dared hope for. The Missouri Farm Bureau assigned their top agricultural rights specialist to coordinate with my case, recognizing that successful trust enforcement would strengthen protection for family farms across the state. Mr. Thornfield, explained Farm Bureau attorney David Micah, his voice carrying the weight of institutional power, your case represents the future of agricultural property rights in America. We're prepared to fund this fight to the Supreme Court, but honestly, after reviewing your documentation, this war ends tonight. Thursday's preparation focused on the psychological warfare aspect that would make Sun Tzu proud. Vivian's entire strategy relied on her assumption that simple farmers couldn't match her sophisticated legal maneuvering. She'd built her harassment campaign on the premise that I was David throwing rocks at Goliath. Tonight, she'd discover that some Davids come equipped with nuclear slingshots. The media coordination felt like orchestrating a beautiful symphony of public humiliation. Regional television had picked up the corruption angle. Agricultural publications were covering it as landmark property rights precedent. National legal journals wanted to document the first heritage trust enforcement in decades, but the Friday afternoon phone call was pure poetry. FBI agent Patricia Valdez from the Agricultural Crime Unit would be attending tonight's session as an observer, assessing whether my case warranted federal investigation into organized rural property acquisition schemes. Mr. Thornfield, she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd put corporate criminals in federal cages. We've identified similar patterns across multiple states. Tonight's outcome determines whether this becomes a federal case with federal consequences. As sunset painted my century-old fields gold, I sat in Dad's leather chair, surrounded by documentation that would either destroy Vivian's world completely or escalate this war to levels she couldn't even comprehend. The smell of fresh-turned earth drifted through open windows, mixing with the aroma of victory that had been 99 years in the making. Tomorrow morning would either bring the sweetest legal triumph in family history or the opening moves of a federal investigation that would make tonight's fireworks look like birthday candles. But staring at those trust documents, feeling the weight of state sovereignty and federal protection behind every page, I knew exactly how this story was going to end. Some wars are won before the first shot is fired. Saturday morning, 2 days before the showdown that would end everything, Vivian decided to throw one final tantrum that crossed every line between desperation and criminal stupidity. I discovered the first sabotage around 5 a.m. during morning chores. My main water line to the cattle troughs had been cut clean through with professional precision. Not amateur vandalism, but surgical destruction designed to cause maximum damage with minimum evidence. The smell of diesel fuel and morning dew mixed with my rising anger as I surveyed $3,000 worth of ruined equipment. But that was just the opening act. By Tuesday, they'd escalated to pure terrorism. Tractor tires slashed with box cutters. Irrigation system control panels ripped apart like Christmas presents. Fence posts loosened just enough to let cattle wander onto county roads, creating liability nightmares and safety hazards that could have killed someone. The psychological warfare was even more disgusting. Dead raccoons left near my mailbox like some kind of suburban voodoo ritual. Anonymous phone calls at 2 a.m. featuring heavy breathing and threats about accidents happening to people who don't know when they're beaten. Wednesday night brought the false flag operation that proved Vivian had completely lost her mind. My security cameras captured the whole beautiful disaster. 2 men in dark clothing dumping industrial waste containers near my property line at 11 p.m. Professional job, clean execution, except they forgot that farmers invest in really good night vision equipment for watching over livestock. Thursday morning, Vivian's environmental complaint hit my phone like clockwork. Anonymous tip to the state environmental agency about illegal dumping by agricultural operations. Photos conveniently provided showing contamination evidence that looked damning enough to trigger emergency inspection protocols. The state inspector arrived Friday afternoon expecting to find environmental violations that would justify immediate farm closure. Marcus Delacroix, 20-year agency veteran with the weathered look of someone who'd seen every scam in the book, stepped out of his truck wearing the expression of a man preparing to ruin someone's life. Mr. Thornfield, we've received serious allegations about improper waste disposal on your property. Inspector Delacroix, I replied, my voice carrying the calm confidence of someone holding a royal flush. Before you start your investigation, you might want to see this. I handed him my laptop showing Wednesday night's security footage in crystal clear high definition. Two men dumping containers labeled with chemicals that had never existed anywhere near my farm operation. License plate clearly visible. Timestamps proving the waste appeared overnight. His expression shifted from professional skepticism to barely controlled rage. "Mr. Thornfield, are you telling me someone staged environmental contamination on your property? I'm telling you those containers were dumped by individuals working for parties who filed the complaint the next morning. I have documentation proving the waste materials contain industrial chemicals that have never been used in agricultural operations." Delacroix spent the next 3 hours conducting the most thorough environmental inspection in county history, testing soil, water, and air quality with scientific precision that would have made a university proud. His final report concluded that my farming operation exceeded state environmental standards, and that the dumped materials were inconsistent with agricultural waste streams and clearly introduced from external sources. He made 2 phone calls before leaving, one to the State Attorney General's office about false environmental reporting, and another to federal agricultural crime investigators about what he called the most blatant attempt at environmental frame-up I've encountered in 20 years. But Vivian wasn't finished destroying herself. Friday evening brought her masterstroke of stupidity. Richmond Blackthorne showing up at my door with a briefcase full of cash and the kind of offer that turns gray areas into federal crimes. "Jake," he said, his voice carrying the oily confidence of someone who'd bribed his way through life, "my wife's gotten a little carried away with this neighborhood improvement thing. How about we cut through the bullshit? 1.2 million cash, deal closes Monday, and all this unpleasantness goes away." I kept my phone recording while he explained how continuing legal harassment would cost me more than accepting their generous offer. How environmental complaints would keep coming until I surrendered. How they had connections in state government that could make my life very difficult, indefinitely. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Extortion, conspiracy, and admission of orchestrating the entire harassment campaign, all recorded in his own words with legal clarity that would make federal prosecutors weep tears of pure joy. "Mr. Blackthorne," I replied, "I appreciate the offer, but this farm's not for sale. Never has been, never will be." His friendly mask slipped, revealing the entitled rage underneath. "You're making a serious mistake, Thornfield. We tried to handle this the easy way." "Sir, I think you're the one making mistakes. Have a good evening." After he left, I immediately called FBI agent Patricia Valdez with Friday night's recording. Her response was everything I'd hoped for. "Mr. Thornfield, you just handed us a federal extortion case. We'll have arrest warrants ready by Monday morning. Monday night's council session would be more than legal victory. It would be the opening act of a federal investigation that would destroy everyone involved in this conspiracy. Some people are so busy digging graves, they don't notice when they're standing in them." Sunday morning, less than 12 hours before the council session that would end this war, Vivian pulled her most desperate and dangerous card yet. She decided to play victim. I was feeding the cattle when Martha Henderson called, her voice tight with the kind of worry that comes from watching neighbors lose their minds. "Jake, you need to get to the county hospital. Vivian's in the emergency room claiming you tried to poison her." The drive to the hospital felt like swimming through molasses. My mind raced through every possible angle while my hands gripped the steering wheel tight enough to leave permanent impressions. Vivian had finally crossed the line from harassment into outright fraud, and the smell of my own nervous sweat mixed with morning coffee told me she wasn't done yet. The hospital waiting room buzzed with artificial drama. 3 HOA board members clustered around folding chairs, whispering in the hushed tones people use when they're performing grief for an audience. A local news cameraman lurked near the vending machines, and I could practically smell the manufactured crisis in the air. Vivian emerged from the emergency room wearing a hospital gown over her designer clothes like some kind of suburban martyr, clutching Richmond's arm with theatrical weakness. Her performance was Broadway quality, labored breathing, dramatic pauses, and the kind of tragic expression that belonged on a soap opera. "That man's agricultural operations nearly killed me," she announced to the news camera, her voice carrying just enough tremor to sound believable. "Ammonia exposure from his cattle facility caused severe respiratory distress. I could have died if I hadn't gotten immediate medical attention." The reporter ate it up like Sunday dinner. "Mrs. Blackthorne, are you saying Mr. Thornfield's farm poses an immediate health threat to the community?" I'm saying dangerous agricultural practices have no place near family neighborhoods. Tonight's council session isn't just about property rights, it's about protecting innocent lives. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. She just committed fraud on live television while creating the perfect setup for her final defeat. But the real knife twist came Monday afternoon when my insurance company called with news that made my blood pressure spike like a rocket launch. "Jake, I've got some troubling developments," Bill Kowalski said, his voice carrying the Undertaker's tone that insurance agents perfect when they're about to bury your financial future. "We've received multiple reports questioning your operations safety profile. Corporates demanding immediate policy cancellation pending investigation." "What kind of reports?" "Anonymous complaints about atmospheric safety violations, claims of respiratory hazard to neighbors, allegations of negligent ammonia management. They're treating it as high-risk liability until proven otherwise." Vivian had weaponized my insurance coverage, trying to force operational shutdown through financial pressure. Classic corporate warfare disguised as safety concerns. But while she was busy playing insurance games, federal investigators had been conducting their own research into what Agent Valdez called pattern recognition analysis. Richmond's Friday night extortion attempt had triggered expanded surveillance that revealed the beautiful scope of their conspiracy. Monday evening, 2 hours before the council session, Valdez called with news that made my farmer's heart sing like a perfectly tuned combine harvester. "Mr. Thornfield, we've identified financial connections between your harassment campaign and similar schemes in 3 adjacent counties. Caldwell Enterprises has been using identical tactics against rural properties for the past 5 years. Federal racketeering charges are being prepared as we speak." Racketeering. The kind of federal crime that turns suburban conspiracies into 20-year prison sentences. But the final twist came from an unexpected source. Patricia Delmont, HOA board member who'd been growing increasingly uncomfortable with Vivian's escalating tactics. She contacted me through Martha Henderson with evidence that would make tonight's revelation even more satisfying. "Mr. Thornfield," she said, her voice shaking with the moral weight of whistleblowing against neighbors, "I can't stay silent anymore. I have recordings of board meetings where Vivian admits the entire campaign was designed to force your property sale. She's been coordinating with developers from the beginning." The recordings were prosecution gold. Vivian openly discussing harassment strategies, Richmond explaining financial incentives for board members, and detailed planning for what they called escalating pressure campaigns, designed to break rural property owners financially and psychologically. "There's more," Patricia continued. "The medical emergency was completely staged. Vivian met with that doctor 3 times before Friday's incident, coaching him on what symptoms to document. The whole thing was performance art designed to create evidence for tonight's presentation. Medical fraud, insurance fraud, conspiracy, extortion, racketeering. Vivian had built a federal case against herself so comprehensive that prosecutors would probably frame it and hang it in their offices as an example of perfect criminal stupidity. As evening approached and I prepared for the final confrontation, my phone buzzed with a text from Agent Valdez. "Arrest warrant signed. Will be in position at the council chambers. Tonight ends with handcuffs." Driving toward the courthouse, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. Complete, absolute confidence. Not hope or determination, but the cold certainty that comes from knowing your enemies have destroyed themselves so thoroughly that victory is just a formality. Tonight wouldn't just be legal triumph, it would be federal justice served with a side of public humiliation that would echo through county politics for generations. Some people dig their own graves so efficiently, you almost feel sorry for them. Monday night, 7 p.m. sharp, the county courthouse transformed into the kind of circus that political careers die in and legends are born from. The main chamber was packed beyond fire code capacity, with every seat filled and people standing 3 deep along the walls. Television cameras lined the back row like electronic vultures waiting for roadkill. The air hummed with nervous energy, expensive perfume, and the metallic taste of impending disaster for someone. Vivian entered wearing a Navy power suit that probably cost more than my monthly farm income, flanked by Richmond and 2 attorneys who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else on the planet. She moved with the confident stride of someone who believed she was about to deliver the killing blow in a war she'd already won. Her supporters filled the left side of the chamber, HOA board members, concerned mothers, and enough suburban righteousness to choke a courtroom. They clutched printed fact sheets about agricultural safety violations and medical evidence that would crumble under the slightest scrutiny. My side looked like a Norman Rockwell painting come to life. Farmers in clean flannel, longtime residents who remembered when this was all agricultural country, and enough authentic rural backbone to intimidate a corporate lawyer convention. Martha Henderson had organized them with military precision, and their quiet confidence filled the room like morning fog over a cornfield. But the real power players were the people nobody noticed. Caroline Merritt from the State Agricultural Department sitting in the front row with a briefcase full of nuclear legal weapons, and FBI agent Patricia Valdez positioned near the exit like a patient predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Mayor Davidson called the session to order with the nervous energy of a man who suspected he was about to watch several political careers spontaneously combust. We're here to address ongoing concerns regarding agricultural operations and community safety standards. Vivian approached the podium with theatrical gravitas, her voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who'd never lost a legal argument. Commissioners, what happened to me Friday night proves this situation has escalated beyond property disputes to immediate public health emergency. She painted a masterpiece of manufactured crisis, detailed medical testimony about respiratory distress, expert environmental analysis showing atmospheric safety violations, and compelling evidence that my farm posed imminent danger to innocent families. Professional, polished, and built on lies so sophisticated they almost deserved respect. Mr. Thornfield's agricultural operations have exceeded safe ammonia levels, causing documented health emergencies and creating liability risks the city cannot ignore, she continued, displaying charts that would have impressed a graduate school presentation. We're requesting immediate emergency restrictions pending comprehensive safety evaluation. The audience murmured with the kind of nervous energy that comes from watching someone perform their own professional execution without realizing it. Her presentation was flawless except for one small detail. Every word was federal criminal fraud. When she finished, the chamber fell silent, except for the hum of television cameras capturing what they thought was my public defeat. Mayor Davidson cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Thornfield, you have an opportunity to respond." I stood up slowly, carrying a single manila envelope that felt heavier than a coffin. The walk to the podium stretched like a Western movie showdown, boots echoing on marble, while 200 people held their breath waiting for someone's world to explode. "Before we discuss agricultural safety," I said, opening the envelope with deliberate ceremony, "I'd like to present some documents that might interest this community." I spread the 1924 Agricultural Heritage Trust Agreement across the podium like a royal flush in a high-stakes poker game. The official state seal caught the overhead lights, and Vivian's confident expression began cracking like ice on a warm pond. "This property has been protected by Missouri Agricultural Heritage Trust status since 1924. Every complaint, every ordinance, every legal action taken against this farm has been completely invalid for 99 years. The silence was delicious. You could hear paper rustling, chairs creaking, and someone's nervous stomach gurgling in the back row. Caroline Merritt stood up, her voice carrying the authority of state sovereignty. "The state of Missouri confirms trust number 007 status for this property. Local governments have zero jurisdiction over agricultural heritage trust operations." But the real mic drop moment came when I pulled out my phone and played Richmond Blackthorn's recorded extortion attempt from Friday night. His oily voice filled the chamber, admitting to orchestrating the entire harassment campaign and offering bribes to force property sale. "Furthermore," I continued as gasps echoed through the room, "Friday night's medical emergency was staged fraud designed to create false evidence for tonight's presentation. I have documentation proving premeditation and conspiracy." Vivian shot up like a jack-in-the-box, pointing an accusatory finger that trembled with rage and desperation. "This is character assassination. 19th century paperwork can't override modern safety standards." That's when Agent Valdez stepped forward, badge gleaming under fluorescent lights like a beacon of federal justice. "Mrs. Blackthorn, you're under arrest for conspiracy, extortion, fraud, and violation of federal agricultural protection laws." The room erupted in chaos as handcuffs clicked around Vivian's wrists. Television cameras captured every moment of her professional destruction while she screamed about conspiracies and government overreach. Richmond tried to run. 2 more FBI agents caught him at the exit. 4 city council members suddenly remembered urgent appointments elsewhere. Justice served cold with a side of public humiliation, exactly the way great-grandfather Ezekiel would have wanted it. The timer on my phone reads 3 hours, 17 minutes, and 42 seconds since those 6 police cruisers first tore up my driveway, and I'm still standing on the same porch where this whole war began. Except now I'm watching my grandson chase chickens across land that's protected by federal law forever. The morning coffee tastes like victory when you're sipping it on property that survived a suburban invasion, and watching sunrise paint fields that will never become strip malls hits different when you've earned the view through handcuffs, federal court, and the sweet justice of watching corrupt people destroy themselves on live television. The immediate aftermath was more beautiful than Christmas morning and Harvest Festival combined. Vivian drew 18 months in federal prison for conspiracy and extortion. Richmond got 2 years for racketeering. 3 city council members resigned before the FBI finished building cases that would have sent them to join their HOA queen in federal lockup. Caldwell Enterprises dissolved faster than sugar in a thunderstorm, leaving behind nothing but criminal referrals and a development industry that suddenly remembered why agricultural property rights exist. But the real victory wasn't watching entitled suburbanites get their comeuppance. It was what rose from the ashes of their corruption. The $73,000 court-ordered restitution became seed money for something I'd never dared dream: the Thornfield Agricultural Heritage Center. Every Saturday morning, the same fields Vivian wanted to pave host educational programs where suburban kids learn that milk doesn't magically appear in grocery stores, and former HOA members discover that farmers aren't environmental villains, but environmental stewards. The irony tastes sweeter than fresh honey. Willowbrook Estates' property values soared after the Heritage Center opened. Turns out, living next to protected farmland with educational programming is the kind of amenity real estate agents fantasize about. Agricultural tourism now pumps $240,000 annually into local businesses, proving that sometimes the best revenge is massive success that lifts entire communities. Martha Henderson runs our community garden program on 5 acres I dedicated for families wanting to understand farming beyond grocery store ignorance. Watching former enemies learn to appreciate morning rooster calls and evening cattle lowing has been more healing than any therapy session. The legal precedent rippled across the state like stones thrown into still water. Missouri strengthened agricultural heritage trust protections, making future Vivian-style harassment campaigns legally impossible. 23 additional properties have gained heritage status, creating a network of protected farmland that will feed communities long after we're all fertilizer. My personal life bloomed in unexpected ways. During documentary filming about agricultural preservation, I met Sarah Micah, an environmental journalist who came to cover the legal battle and stayed to help plan educational programs. She understands that farming isn't just work. It's a calling that requires partners who appreciate dirt under fingernails and conversations interrupted by emergency veterinary calls. Dad's Memorial Garden has become a pilgrimage destination for agricultural families facing development pressure. His heritage tomatoes grow alongside vegetables from cultures worldwide, proving that farming traditions honor the past while embracing the future. The scholarship fund we established helps urban kids attend agricultural colleges with full funding from settlement money, Vivian's stupidity provided. 6 students are currently studying sustainable agriculture, ensuring farming knowledge passes to generations who might never have discovered it otherwise. Federal agricultural crime investigators use our case as training material for identifying organized rural harassment schemes. Agent Valdez says they've prevented similar campaigns in 7 states by recognizing patterns our victory helped establish. But the most meaningful transformation is personal. That desperate farmer who almost lost everything to suburban harassment became something unexpected, a confident advocate who testifies before state committees and helps rural families fight development pressure with legal weapons instead of despair. The farm's future is armored in ways great-grandfather Ezekiel never imagined possible. Federal protection, state trust status, and community support create barriers no future corruption can penetrate. As I write these final words, my phone buzzes with a message from a Montana rancher facing luxury resort pressure. Tomorrow, I'll share everything we learned about beating corruption with law books instead of bankruptcy, because the best way to honor Dad's deathbed promise isn't just protecting what he built, it's helping other families protect what they've built too. Your turn now. Share your HOA horror stories in the comments below. I'm reading every single one, and some of you might discover legal protections you never knew existed. And if watching corrupt suburbanites get federal justice served ice cold made your day, smash that subscribe button. Because David versus Goliath victories are coming weekly, and next time you might be the one holding the nuclear slingshot. Justice tastes best when it's served with a side of community healing and a dash of federal prison time.